Hey, this is Jennifer and Megan. We are two sisters from South Carolina on a mission to discover more about our British grandmother's life in London by reading, researching, and sharing her love letters she wrote during World War II. If you're looking for an interesting, unique perspective on life, love, and London during World War II, then you have found the right place. We will take you through each letter and bring them to life as we have recently traveled to some of the exact places mentioned in these letters. Think of this as a historic love story come to life. So grab your favorite beverage and blanket and prepare to dive in with us. This is the All My Love, Lucy podcast. Hey, and welcome to the first episode of the All My Love, Lucy podcast. We're so glad you're here with us.
This has been a long time coming. We have had many people suggest that we do a podcast or a book, and so we're finally making it happen.
We are, and we feel that our grandparents' story is so special that we need to share it. And every time we talk to someone about it, they confirm it. Speaking of the podcast route, we want to give a shout out to our cousin Jack for being the first to suggest that we do a podcast when we met him for the first time in London. And we'll talk more about him and our cousins Mary and Beth in a later episode also, because we have a really cool story about connecting with them. And who knows, we may be able to get them on an episode in the future sometime. So buckle up. It's going to be a long ride. We have letters from over a 2-year period, and Lucy wrote to Jimmie often. So we hope you'll stick around because there's a lot to unpack.
Also, we'd like to give a shout out to all of our friends on Facebook who've helped name the podcast by voting in our polls and all the support and love we have received so far.
Oh, yes. And the All My Love Lucy title overwhelmingly won the most votes in the poll. And we agree with y'all. We love it.
Oh, yeah. It's perfect.
Perfect. One more shout out to our older sister, Stacy. We don't want y'all to think that there are only 2 sisters. There are 3 of us, and we hope that she'll join us on an episode sometime in the future. Now, for our first episode, we want to give you a little bit of context before we jump in. So our grandmother, Lucy, was born and raised in London, England, and our grandfather, James, who she affectionately refers to as Jimmie, was born and raised in South Carolina, here in the town that we're in today. So he was in the U.S. Army and was stationed in London when they first met.
At the time of this first letter, they had met, fallen in love, gotten engaged, and were planning on getting married in London and then moving to South Carolina once the war was over. As you'll soon discover, these plans did not happen.
And so the way we're going to do the podcast is we're going to read and break down the letters, discussing the events and the significant moments that she mentions throughout. And then at the very end of each episode, we will have an uninterrupted reading of the complete letter. So stick around for that. And we're going to get started now with the first letter, letter number 1.
May 29th, 1944. My darling Jimmie, I was so relieved and happy when I received your letter on Thursday, for as you will see from the postmarks, it was kept back by the censor.
And the censors, of course, were in place to make sure soldiers didn't say anything that would be of value to the enemy if the letters fell into the wrong hands. And I'm sure she would have gotten upset at how long that process delayed her receiving his letters sometimes.
I was so glad to hear you got a seat in the train. I hated to leave you so soon, darling, but I was afraid that if I had lingered, you would not have gotten one, and I did not want you to have to stand on that long journey.
So we definitely want to take a pause here and talk about this moment because this is a huge, significant moment in the story. When Jimmie left that day, when he left the train station, they unknowingly would not see each other again for 2 years. Now, we don't know exactly where he had to go, but we do know that he was part of the campaigns and battles of Normandy, France, Ardennes, Rhineland, and Central Europe. So he most likely would not have gone extremely far away when he left that day, but we do know that he got shipped back to the U.S. before he could return to London and before he and Lucy could see each other again, and that took 2 years. Also, from this moment at the train station, they would never be in London together again in their lifetime. She returned and visited to visit family and took our dad, but he never returned with her. And I wish we knew the train station that he left from this day so that when we go back, we could visit. That'd be really cool. So, needless to say, this moment right here is a huge moment with great significance in the story. And it's because of that 2 year period that they were apart that we have these letters.
She goes on to say, on the following Sunday, I went to see Muriel.
And Muriel, we want to talk about Muriel because she mentions Muriel a lot in her letters, and Muriel was her best friend. They weren't related, but they were best friends. And another cool thing about Muriel is when I was a child, we were pen pals, and so we wrote back and forth, and I called her Auntie Muriel. And so it's really cool to see her come to life in these letters and hear Grandma Lucy talk about her and the things they did together.
And as it was such a nice afternoon, we took a bus to Oxford Street and watched the Home Guard parade.
So the Home Guard Parade is worth mentioning here because it was a big event. The Home Guard was an armed citizen militia made up of British men who were ineligible for military service at the time. It was the ones who were too young or too old and they couldn't join the military because the regular military service was restricted to ages 18 to 41. And so at the outbreak of the war, Churchill called for a force of these men to be formed, and they helped serve at home, supporting the British Army. They would guard the coastal areas, the vital airfields, and the factories. And so they were celebrated in these parades that took place across the country. The king would have been in attendance, so it was a big deal. And there would have been thousands of people in attendance. So when she mentions this here, we don't want to just skip over it because the Home Guard Parade was actually a huge event that they went to that day.
She goes on to say, we stood right beside Jack Holbert, the film star and stage actor, as he was on police duty, and we happened to be right in the front row.
So to take a minute to talk about, excuse me, Jack Colbert, he was a film star and stage actor, as she said, and he went down in history as one of the greatest light comedians of the British stage. And so we think about that and think about them standing right beside him. And it could possibly be someone like Ryan Reynolds or some other type of famous comedy actor that we are familiar with here. And I'm sure they were fangirling and blushing and so excited when they saw him. And I think it's really neat that she included that and talked about this in the letter.
After it was all over, we returned to Muriel's home for tea and spent the rest of the evening listening to the radio.
So this is a peek into their social life. And of course, I mentioned of the afternoon tea. And in Grandma Lucy's honor, Megan and I had a really fun experience with afternoon tea when we visited London in September. And we'll talk more about that sometime later, but it was a really fun experience. And we did that in her memory and in her honor. But then them going back to Muriel's house to listen to the radio kind of makes me think like if we go back to someone's house and watch a movie or watch Netflix. And so that kind of gives us a peek into their social life there.
I did not do anything exciting last week except reading, but on Saturday afternoon, I went with Muriel to Covent Garden.
And real quick, Covent Garden is where they first met. And again, Megan and I went there back in September when we visited London. We went to Covent Garden. Now, we do not know the exact location of where they met, but it was fun to walk around and imagine different scenarios of how it may have happened when they first laid eyes on one another. So it's kind of a surreal moment to be walking around there, knowing it. And who knows, we may have been in the place where they met each other. So that was a really neat moment.
Yeah, like did they bump into each other on the street or did they have mutual friends, go out to dinner? Yeah, it was really cool to try to visualize what could have happened.
Yeah, and it's hard to put into words after we read these letters. It's hard to put into words how we felt when we were in London and when we would visit these places. It was just kind of surreal is the only word I can think of to describe it, but it was just a really, really great trip and a great experience.
She goes on to say, I have not been there for a long time, and so it was a change, but sweetheart, I missed you so much and kept thinking of the Saturday we first met there, and I wished very much that you could be with me again. Needless to say, I was a good girl and returned home with Muriel because, darling, you said you trust me, and for that reason, I would not do anything to destroy your faith in me. So I hope you will be glad and happy to know that I never forget that I belong to you or waver in any way. Your lovely ring makes me so proud, and every time I look at it, I get a big thrill because I think of you and all it stands for.
So we have that lovely ring here. Take it out. And if you're watching on video, you can see it here. Let's see if I can get it in the camera. That's her lovely ring that she mentions here. And it's in the original box here. And when we went to London, we visited the actual ring shop that they went to. And it was that, again, another surreal experience when we went to the ring shop. Now, of course, the ring shop would not look the same. It had been totally renovated, but we did get to go inside and have our picture made and tell the people our story. But the ring shop is on a street called New Bond Street. And that kind of blew our minds because it's a street that has Tiffany's and Chanel and what else did it have?
Like Louis Vuitton,
Yeah,
Gucci, just all the high-end designer stores. And
definitely I felt out of place there, but it was a really cool street, and there were guards guarding the stores. We did get to go in Tiffany's too. We went in there. It was a really neat experience. But the ring shop, of course, was the highlight of us going down New Bond Street. And the Ritz Hotel was right around the corner there. It was just a really neat area. And another surreal moment to walk into the store, the same place that they walked in to purchase her ring. So that was just a great time.
she goes on to say, being Whit Monday, Muriel and I went to the Westminster Theater and saw the play An Ideal Husband by Oscar Wilde, and we both enjoyed it immensely.
So Whit Monday is worth mentioning. We don't want to skip over that because Whit Monday is Britain's traditional springtime holiday, and it holds great significance for Christians as it's Pentecost Monday, the day after Pentecost, and it commemorates the moment of the Holy Spirit's descent on Jesus Christ's apostles to spread the gospel throughout the world as told in the Bible. The name wit is derived from the word white, and it refers to the white garments that were traditionally worn by those who were baptized during the Pentecost season. Excuse me. And so if you look on, you can Google or go on YouTube and look at pictures or videos of the parades that they would have, and you can see a lot of people wearing white, and that's why. But the celebration of Whit Monday has evolved over time, and in many countries, it's still a public holiday, allowing people to be off work and attend their special services and the parades and events, spend time with their family and friends. And it kind of makes me think of how Good Friday is here. Some businesses do close, some don't, but it's still widely recognized here in the US. But secularly, the Whit Monday is now referred to as the Spring Bank holiday, and that changed in 1972. But this particular year in 1944, and she's talking about it, there was, I found a New York Times article when I was scrolling, trying to research and learn more about it. And it was titled The British on Holiday Forget War Woes. And they considered it a little bit of a break before that final stretch in the war to defeat Hitler. So that was just bringing in the whole war aspect and what was going on during that time. That was one of the newspaper article titles. And then An Ideal Husband, the play that they went to, it was a play about marriage, blackmail, and political corruption. And it was staged at the Westminster Theater in 1943 through 44. And we have an original program from that specific play. Again, if you're watching on video, I'm trying to show it to you if I can get it to show up good. And there's also a 1999 movie version if you're interested. And I was telling Megan it's entertaining, but it's not the best movie. There's a couple of famous actors, Minnie Driver and Julianne Moore. I can't remember the names of the others, but I can see why she liked it, why she liked the play. The storyline's kind of interesting. But if you're interested, you can go look that movie up, the 1999 version, and watch that.
We had a heavy storm this evening about 9 o'clock, and I was glad when it was over, as I do not like the lightning.
And I have quickly learned, or we have quickly learned, that if she mentions something in these letters, it's worth researching,
Mhm.
even something as simple as the weather. Because an interesting fact about this particular day, there was an extraordinary heat wave going on at the time at the end of May that year, and it was the warmest and sunniest wet Monday on record. Now, it was 91 degrees Fahrenheit, and they considered that an extraordinary heat wave. Now, here in South Carolina, we may not consider that an extraordinary heat wave. That's kind of the norm for us. But the May weather there can be quite variable from snow to really hot. And so on this day here that she mentions during the day, of course, like I said, it would have been really hot and sunny. The people would have been out in the parades and the events that were going on outside and the whatever else they may do in the outdoor events. But by late afternoon, the heat from the 90s dropped down into the 60s, and we all know that creates a very explosive atmosphere for storms. And so, this particular day, that atmosphere set off some really powerful thunderstorms and caused severe flooding and a lot of damage in parts of the country. And I looked up that day and looked at news articles, and there was some serious flooding, and a few people died because of the flooding and the storms. So even though it didn't happen exactly where she was, just that she mentioned that, and it was a significant moment in history.
She goes on to say, I am happy to think you still have my lilies of the valley, and I wish I had some more to send to you.
So it was commonplace to send flowers in the letters you sent to a loved one, and we have found many flowers in the letters that she has. She sent some and she received some, so we have both. But this practice is called florography, and this was an ancient Turkish tradition that influenced English culture, especially by Queen Victoria. And we all know the great love story between Queen Victoria and Prince Albert, and she and Prince Albert exchanged flowers often, and they usually had some significant meaning behind them or symbolism behind them. So, the lilies of the valley here that Lucy mentions, they're beautiful, sweetly scented white flowers, and they symbolize love and purity and are thought to bring luck and love and happiness. And they were often found in wedding bouquets because of this. And since, according to her, she remained faithful to him for the entire 2 years they were apart, I feel confident that this was an intentional message, don't you?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think she was sending them to him intentionally with the message of love and purity and happiness and hoping to bring luck and love to both of them. So we feel like her sending this specific flower was very intentional.
She goes on to say, well, darling, take great care of yourself and write to me soon because I am longing to hear from you. Let me know whether I may come and see you next Sunday. All my love to you from your Lucy. And as we now know, she was not able to see him the next Sunday. So make sure to stick around to hear more about the reasons why Lucy wasn't able to see Jimmie again for 2 years and how she details her life and hardships and longing while they were apart.
And if you don't want to miss any of our episodes, please make sure to subscribe to our channels, hit that like button, leave us some comments and reviews if they're nice. And please share with your friends because the more the merrier.
We want to thank y'all so much for joining us and hanging out with us.
Yes.
We truly hope you've enjoyed this episode.
Yes. And as promised, we will end this episode with an uninterrupted reading of the letter. So until next time, enjoy. May 29th, 1944. My darling Jimmie, I was so relieved and happy when I received your letter on Thursday, for as you will see from the postmarks, it was kept back by the censor. I was so glad to hear you got a seat in the train. I hated to leave you so soon, darling, but I was afraid that if I lingered, you would not have gotten one, and I did not want you to have to stand on that long journey. On the following Sunday, I went to see Muriel, And as it was such a nice afternoon, we took a bus to Oxford Street and watched the Home Guard parade. We stood right beside Jack Holbert, the film star and stage actor, as he was on police duty, and we happened to be right in the front row. After it was all over, we returned to Muriel's home for tea and spent the rest of the evening listening to the radio. I did not do anything exciting last week except reading, but on Saturday afternoon, I went with Muriel to Covent Garden. I have not been there for a long time, and so it was a change, but sweetheart, I missed you so much and kept thinking of the Saturday we first met there and wished very much that you could be with me again. Needless to say, I was a good girl and returned home with Muriel because, darling, you said you trust me, and for that reason, I would not do anything to destroy your faith in me. So I hope you will be glad and happy to know that I will never forget that I belong to you or waver in any way. Your lovely ring makes me so proud, and every time I look at it, I get a big thrill because I think of you and all it stands for. Being Whit Monday, Muriel and I went to the Westminster Theatre and saw the play An Ideal Husband by Oscar Wilde, and we both enjoyed it immensely. We had a heavy storm this evening about 9 o'clock, and I was glad when it was over, as I do not like the lightning. I'm happy to think you still have my lilies of the valley, and I wish I had some more to send to you. Well, darling, take great care of yourself and write to me soon, because I'm longing to hear from you. Let me know whether I may come and see you next Sunday. All my love to you, from your Lucy. If you are hearing this message, you've listened to the entire episode, and for that, we want to thank you from the bottom of our hearts. We truly hope you enjoyed this episode, and we hope you'll return for the next episode of the All My Love Lucy podcast.